I'm already a huge fan of Prana. I know it's still in like the infancy stages.
It is,
but
yes.
but it's such an amazing concept because what you're doing is you're working with Comic Hub.
Correct.
And Comic Hub, for those who don't know, is it's a platform, and it's a list of retailers that are putting in this information.
Right.
I think you can expand on it better than I can.
So I'll pull that apart. We'll start with Prana. So I worked with Valiant for about a little over 7 years. I started just before 2012 when we started publishing, and then after DMG took over, it seemed like it was just time. It was time to move on to something else. And so, having taken a little bit of time off, I decided I wanted to come back into comics, and I wanted to contribute and help using what I'd learned. One of the things that we had done at Valiant really well, and I believe they're continuing to do, is we looked at every available data we could get about how our books were being sold and who they were being sold to, and we took as much feedback as we could get, and we changed the tone of our message and the audience that message went to, depending on what was needed. So I wanted to build a company that did exactly that for everyone, because I think it is something that makes comics much more strong as an industry. And so picked Prana as a word. I'm a yogi. I'm passionate about yoga, and in it we talk about prana being the energy that we bring in and the way that we process that energy. And so Prana as a company is designed to bring in the data, bring in the energy, bring in the feedback, and not just change the message, but change who the audience is, and let people know what it is they're buying and why they should buy it. Because so much of what we're doing now is that comics is at its most diverse point in our history. We are making stories for everyone.
Sure.
And so how do you find that audience for your book? Not how do I change the book to reach an audience, but once I have this piece of art, how do I find the audience for that book? And that's the question.
And it's a really interesting question, because you think about it, there's so many pitfalls for something where it's like, okay, well, the book gets made, now we have to make sure the retailer orders it. If the retailer doesn't order it, then the customer can't pick it up.
Right.
And if that doesn't happen, there's no sales. The creator cannot continue to make the project they love. Mm-hmm. And the same thing goes true where if the retailer orders it, but no one goes to pick it up, it's also a pitfall, because then you're hurting the retailer who took a chance on this book, and the creator goes, oh, okay, great, I'm going to put out the next issue, and no one's going to buy it.
Yeah.
But it all kind of comes down to that symbiotic relationship with making sure everything along the path and it works and is working, and I think that's something that's
well, and that is the challenge, right? So we have those people, we're all of us in this relationship, right? With the creator, the publisher, the distributor, the retailer, the fan. And you can replace the people in those links, depending on how it's getting to the fan. Maybe instead of a distributor, you're dealing with a digital provider or something along those lines. But there's somebody in those links. And the issue is that they each have different needs, right? They each are asking different questions, and have different needs for answers to those questions. So it's a question of how do you pick apart that chain, and how do you decide how do you do that? One of the problems that has come up is, you're absolutely right, is that as a publisher, it starts to feel like that retailer is a stumbling block, because it feels like a stumbling block on your way to the fan. And many of them have bypassed that, but they're bypassing that through other chains, like they're using, things like Kickstarter and those sorts of things. But even those come with their own pitfalls. So really, it's a question of how are we answering the questions those people need, and when. As entertainers, as broadcasters, our temptation is to just shotgun the information out all at once. We put out a press release, we send it to whoever it is, we negotiate, get stories talked about online, whatever it is, and we just broadcast everything all at the same time. That isn't the way it works for most people. the retailer needs to hear about this book 2 months in advance. The distributor needs to hear about it a month to 2 months before that. Frankly, most of the people in the publishing, need to hear about it 2 or 3 months before that. And all of that comes to the fan who's going to make a decision on the day that he goes into the comic book store. Because here's the thing, most fans are not online. Most fans are not reading CBR. They're not reading Bleeding Cool. They just walk into the comic book store and pick up what looks good.
Yeah.
So how do you communicate with them? So that gets us to the second step. The Comic Hub is something I'm working with. I'm incredibly passionate about this project. It's the POS system, point of sale system, which means it's the thing that runs the computer on your retailer's desk. Think Square. Think any of the cash registers that have a screen.
And they track your inventory. They have the diamond code in there, so if you have to reorder, if you have to see what the code is, and it tracks what you have in your inventory and so forth. So it's a very intricate system, but most comic book retailers are working with not Comic Hub necessarily, but a variant on that type of system.
Yeah, so we're getting to a space where the 80-20 rule applies in comics, right? So 20% of stores sell 80% of the comics. Those 20% have almost 90% compliance in having a POS system.
Yep.
Some of them are still using cash registers, and frankly, at some point we had to get cash registers into their stores because at one point all the stores were running out of cigar boxes full of cash.
Yeah.
So now, once they get all of them onto POS systems, that's a great first step because it does manage inventory and it manages inventory and money really well. I took this item I ordered this item, I put it on the shelf, I sold it to you, I took the money and it replaced the item, and now that money is in my account. That flow of information is what POS systems do really well. What they don't tend to do really well is sell books, right? So they're not really a sales tool, they're an inventory control tool. So they say to you, you should have 3 of these on the shelf. If you go over and look on the shelf and there are only 2, you need to figure out what happened to the third. Or you ordered 5 and you only sold 2, so next time only order 2 or 3, right? That's what it does really well for them. What they don't tend to do, and what Comic Hub was designed to do, is to reach out to the fan and say, here's the book you should be reading. I know you like comics. I know you want comics. And I know that you want to spend the time reading comics and the money that you have to spend on comics, reading stuff you like. So here's what it is, right? And it does that in really very clever ways. The man who developed this is Stu Coulson. He is a retailer in New Zealand, a place called Heroes for Sale in Auckland, New Zealand. And he wanted a POS system that he had worked in software before he worked into retail. And he wanted a POS system that would do some of these things that nobody was doing. He couldn't find anything off the rack. So he starts developing it for his own store. He starts writing his own code. And he goes to a retailer meeting and says, hey, I've been writing this thing. What do you guys think? And he gets like 5 or 6 retailers who want to buy it from him. And he's like, okay, well, this is a real business. How do I capitalize on that? How do I make this even better, knowing that it's going to be supporting more than just my store? And so he does. He creates a company, finds an investor, and they have a building in Jaipur in India where they have 5 programmers working around the clock.
Wow.
Just maybe not around the clock. I think they actually go home at some point. But still, it feels around the clock because they're in a different time zone. So they're constantly updating this thing and making it better because comics as an industry evolves and changes, and they're trying to stay ahead of that. We are. So this system. What is this? Stu calls it? He doesn't call it a POS system. He calls it a retail information flow system, I think, RIFS. Essentially, the idea is to make certain that instead of broadcasting, instead of shotgunning that information out, you end up with these kind of tiny circles, right, where you are saying to the distributor, this is the thing you're going to be receiving and this is what it looks like. What do you think? Okay, let's fix that problem. Then it's saying to the retailer, this is the thing that you're going to be selling. What do you think? Let's take that feedback and let's fix that problem for the next round, right? So we're doing all those people that I talked about in that chain, they're all getting the information they need at the time that they're making the decision. It says to the fan, listen, this book is coming up. If you add it to your subscription, we'll know that you want it and we'll know to order enough of it for the shop. And so the fan has an app on their phone, both iOS and Android, that allows them to see what's coming. And it allows them to get information from the publisher.
And the Comic Cup app you can download right now?
Correct. You can download it right now, and you can sign up with your local comic shop that's running it. There are about 30 stores right at the second worldwide that are running it, but we'll probably be at about 60 by the end of the year. We'll see how next year. I would imagine we'll probably double that at least next year. And I think because it'll make us all stronger, it'll make the industry stronger.
And I think I think retailers getting confidence in the system and actually seeing it work will actually see, okay, I know how many to order for this because this is this type of book, I have this type of audience, and I know this is going to fit this niche. And then all of a sudden, it'll, the numbers are the proof,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, and that's just it. So they now have much better information to order with. Right, because the fan has seen it and make that decision for them, so much further in advance, and they can order in a way that is much more profitable for their store, or they can know that when they're going to gamble, what they're gambling on, because they are gamblers, all of them, and the fan is more likely to get the books that they want and more likely to hear about the books that they want, because right this second there's this cacophonous catalog that has every voice and every genre and every it's impossible. No one wants to read everything that comes out in a month.
It's literally impossible to read everything.
Right, exactly. So why are we telling everybody about everything? So let's start narrowing down the field of what it is you're interested in. It happens everywhere else.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but there's no way to watch everything that's on Netflix. No. And I swear, just looking at the stuff that Netflix picks for me, I'm scrolling for half an hour before I watch anything. Yeah. It's like that in comics as well. So all this is about filtering down to what the fans are going to want, and making sure that those things that you still want to crack through the noise, you still want to make a big noise with, you can still do that. There's still mechanisms.